Hello and welcome back to the Joyful Soul Creates. Charlotte here, and today I'm sharing some simple gift boxes I created with elements from the Love From Lizi October card kit. This is actually the first one I made before this video, which gave me the idea for these other boxes, and I made this as part of another video showing a different technique. I'm not going to properly show you what I made, but that video will be coming later this week if you want to see that. So for this video I wanted to make some boxes that will use the cutter parts from the kit as the kind of focal element on the boxes. I'm showing how to size and create the boxes so that you can cut them from one sheet of card, so it's all one element. You don't have multiple parts to stick together. These cutter parts are from the Simple Stories Forever Fall collection, but of course you can use any cutter parts that are of this same size if you want to use my exact measurements that I used, but I've also shown the formula on my piece of paper so you can use that to guide you. So I'll start by showing you with the small cutter part, and that is 3 inches by 4 inches, as you can see by measuring against my craft mat. So we're going to add 1/2 inch to each side, to the width and the length, and that will give the reveal around the edge of the panel. You could skip this and have it exactly the size of the cutter part, and that would completely cover the top of your box in that case. Then we'll decide how deep we want the box to be, and I decided to go with 1 inch as the depth of my box. You can make it deeper if you want, just bear in mind the size of your paper, because you don't want to end up needing a piece of cardstock that's larger than the card you have, because then you won't be able to make your box. So then I'll just plug those numbers I found into my formula. So twice the width is 7 and 3 times the depth is 3. Add that together we get 10, and so on. And I'll do the same with the square ones, except I can't count. As you see, I write it down as 3 by 3 when actually they were 4 by 4, so we'll skip over that and I'll come back to that one in a little while. I didn't realise I had done that wrong until after I had cut and scored my card for that, so I ended up having to put that aside. I'll use it for something else later and completely recut a base for that square box, but never mind. That's why you should always double check your measurements before starting. And then I did go back here to the small cutter part measurements, because of course your box measurements will be different depending which way you want to open it. So here I've also calculated opening on the long side as well as the short side, so you can change up depending which way you want it to open. Next I will show the calculations for doing the large box, and this time I'm going to show both the long and the short, and I'll show you as I demonstrated which way they open. So it's 4 by 6 inches, so with the 1/2 inch reveal that's 4.5 by 6.5. For opening on the long edge, if we do a depth of 1/2 inch and that we want 2 times the width, so 2 times 4.5 is 9 plus 3 of the depth, so that makes 10.5. And on the short side we're using the other way round, so that's 14.5, which is bigger than my paper, so I won't be making one that opens on the short side in this example. And then we'll do the same with the length, which is length plus 2 times the depth, and that gives us our sizing. So we want 12.5 by 7.5 inches for the long side, or then for opening on the short side it would be 14.5 by 5.5. So then we'll go back and fix up the square one. As I said, this is 4 inches square, not 3 inches square. So that's 4.5 by 4.5. And of course you only need one measurement, one final result for this, because it's square, so it will be the same whichever way round you decide to put your cutter part. So that gives us 9 plus 9/4, so 11.25 for the width, and then 4.5 plus 1.5 for the length, which is 6. So that's 11.25 by 6. That was actually slightly bigger than my paper as well, so I believe if I remember correctly, I changed that box to be 1/2 inch deep instead of 3/4 of an inch. So here I'm going to demonstrate making a box. I will only show the one because it would be quite repetitive otherwise, so I'm going to show making one with the smallest cutter part, the rectangle. So I cut it down to the dimensions I measured, and then I'm going to put my score lines in. The score lines are based on the depth, so we want to go 1 inch in on each of the sides. each of the 4 sides. And then to do the central scored area, it's that 1 inch plus the size of the panel. So in this case, 4.5 inches. So we would be scoring at 5.5. That's the 1 plus 4.5, and then another inch in, so 6.5. And then I just checked to make sure my cut apart fit, and it did. Then I'm going to cut the slits into the box to make the tabs and also cut out those ends where the lid would be. I actually wouldn't recommend doing this quite yet. What I would suggest you do first is go in and reinforce all your score lines by bending them and creasing them with a bone folder. It's much easier to do that before cutting them than afterwards. You can still do it afterwards. I did on this one, I did it afterwards, but on my other ones I actually did it before cutting them, and I found that a lot more straightforward. So here is where I'm going in and just reinforcing all the folds. That just means you bend them and you run across them with your bone folder to make sure they're nice and crisp. And I will do that on every single fold and then open it back up. And for the tabs, we want to cut them into a kind of almost, not triangular, but we just want to cut the edges off a bit so that they will bend in more easily. You don't have to get a particular angle for this, it just helps it fold together. One thing I'd been thinking of doing and then completely forgot is to use a little circle die to create an area that you could use to make it easier to open the box, like a finger area, so that when the box is closed you can easily grab hold of the inner portion of the lid to pull it up. Hopefully you'll understand that better when you see it. If I had a circle punch that would work as well, but I don't, so now that I have all my boxes assembled I can't really do that, but if you have a circle punch that would work well. Okay, so now I'm going to assemble the box. And I'm using some super wide tape. If you've seen my videos before, you know I like to use this very wide tape, and my roll ran out and now I have an even wider one. Very useful for covering the back of panels, especially if they're warped. Having that full coverage will help them stick down a lot better. And I did off screen heat emboss a sentiment onto the pumpkin, and this sentiment is from Crafting Desert Divas stamp set called Simply Said, and I heat embossed it with Golden Crown embossing powder from Love From Lizi. I will then press the cut apart onto the top of the box, and I haven't assembled the box yet because if I had it would be not as easy to do that pressing into place, so it's much easier when it's still all flat. I'm going to add some double-sided tape onto all of those tabs. The tabs are the assembly points basically, so you want some very strong adhesive here. Definitely would recommend a dry adhesive like tape rather than a wet adhesive, and the stronger the better, but obviously just be very careful to make sure you've got it lined up properly, because if you have a very strong one and you don't have it lined up properly you're going to be in trouble because you won't be able to get it back apart to fix it. So just be very careful with it. And then I'll just bend those all up into place. Very straightforward. You can use, for some of them used my reverse tweezers to hold each area to make sure it pressed down properly. I had a little trouble with the lid closing, so I just took a very thin sliver off the edge of the tabs of the lid, and then it was able to fold a bit better. I decided to add some more decoration with some Love From Lizi peel-offs, and these are gold. They're kind of matte gold as opposed to the mirror gold. I chose between the matte gold, the mirror gold and the glitter gold, and these are the ones I went for. I felt they were the best match to the sentiment. So I'll just line all around the panel with these, and this would have been easier again when it was flat, but it's easy enough to do, so it didn't matter that I didn't do it initially. But I would suggest putting your embellishments on all your decorations before putting the box together, unless you're adding Nouveau drops like I did on the largest box. So here you can see all the boxes, including the one that I had originally made. Each of these 3 boxes that I made for this video are a different depth and different size, and I used different colour card for them all as well. I used craft for the square box and a kind of creamy colour for the largest box, and then black of course for the one that I demonstrated. The sentiment on the other 2 boxes are also heat embossed with the Golden Crown embossing powder, and they are from a Pink and Main stamp set, and all the products I have used will be linked down below. I did add some Nouveau drops to the large box, and these are ripened pumpkin Nouveau drops, and then I managed to smudge some of them afterwards, so I had to use a sand razor to clean that up, which did rough up the card a bit, but luckily it doesn't show too much, so I managed to salvage it at least. And you can see how they open and close, and here is where I was saying I think a little kind of semicircle punched into that side would help make it easier to open. So if you have a punch, you could do that. If not, then I would suggest die cutting it in before assembling the box. Of course, once it's assembled, you can't really do that anymore. One thing to point out is that large box is big enough to hold greeting cards, so you could use it to gift some cards if you wanted. Here I'm demonstrating. You may recognize this card from one of my recent videos, and here are a couple more. I think you could fit 4 or 5, it depends how bulky the cards are that you want to put in, but this would be a good way to gift some cards to someone. They fit very nicely in the box. And I did make these boxes Thanksgiving inspired, or kind of autumnal, and of course you could do any style, it depends what kind of cut parts you have to use for them. I particularly liked being able to use these cut parts because they're a bit more journal card style, so they weren't really something that I would use on my cards, so it was nice to find another use for them. So that's the project for this video, the 3 boxes that I made. You can skip back, I'll put a timestamp below to where you can find the piece of paper with all the measurements if you want to get a reference of that, and I'll also have them all listed over on my blog. I hope you found this useful and that maybe you'll have a go at making some boxes yourself. If you do, I'd love it if you tag me on social media so I can see them. I hope you will subscribe if you haven't already. There are a couple more videos on screen that you may enjoy. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!